Him and his father make me. I know. I just won a title fight. You can run, but you can hide. He told me, just training hard and you gonna be champion.
If I told you that the current UFC Lightweight Champion of the world comes from a village that hardly consists of 200 people, and where the order of the day is livestock, and carrying rocks down towards the city, would it be too hard to believe? Spending your life in a place with limited means and few opportunities can be a stumbling block if you aim to achieve something big in life. But for Islam, these foundations make him look like an unbreakable rock inside the octagon. Climbing mountains and working out with stones, as a boy he was destined for greatness. Many would say that being Khabib Nurmagomedov's protege has its own merits. However, his story to the top goes much deeper than his humble beginnings and unparalleled skills. Whenever someone hears the name Dagestan, the picture that comes into mind is of grueling training sessions and an army-like life. Such was the case too with little Islam when he stepped into the world of fighting. Born in Makhachkala, Dagestan in 1991, Islam is Lak by ethnicity. Laks are an ethnic group of about 200,000 people who historically live in the Laksky and Kilinsky districts of Dagestan. Islam's parents were not in the best of financial conditions, which justifies why the family later moved to a small village in Dagestan known as Brawl. As soon as he came to the village, Islam found problems settling in, mainly due to the stereotype around the village that the boys from the city were seen as weak. Due to this reason, Islam would indulge in many street fights and would also get beaten up by the local boys just because he came from Makhachkala. Most of the time he would come home beaten and have to face the unwanted interrogation from his parents. Growing up as a kid, Islam was always active and had athletic abilities. He tried different sports such as wrestling, judo, and pankration. Another interesting fact is that he used to live 5 minutes away from the house of the one and only Khabib Nurmagomedov. Being 3 years younger than Khabib, they used to go to the same school. Before turning his attention to MMA full-time, Islam pursued freestyle wrestling till the age of 15. Seeing Khabib train with his father, Islam also turned his attention toward MMA at the age of 16, but he was just an amateur at the time, while Khabib was already levels above him, winning different competitions.
Welcome to America!
At the time, AbulMunap Nurmagomedov was seen as a mentor to everyone in the region. Whilst training Khabib, he also used to train other fighters. It was under his mentorship that he took Islam under his wing and transitioned him from a boy to a man. Islam was also known as AbulMunap's favorite student due to his work ethic in the gym. Khabib and Islam used to train with each other, and this has been the case till this day. They have trained with each other for more than 22 years and are integral to each other's success. Islam supported Khabib at the beginning of his professional career, and so did Khabib when Islam turned professional. Khabib was quickly signed by the UFC in 2011 after starting off his professional career as 16-0. At the same time, Islam would be winning different Sambo World Championships and making his name in M1 Global. Islam would later join the UFC in 2015 while Khabib was facing time out of the octagon due to his knee injuries. These two would train under the guidance of Javier Mendez at American Kickboxing Academy. In his debut, Islam would face Leo Kuntz at UFC 187 and win the fight via rear naked choke.
Beautiful job by Makhachev. Great UFC debut!
Nonetheless, Makhachev would suffer his first defeat in his professional career with a brutal knockout loss to Adriano Martins at UFC 192.
It is all over! Whoa!
Even if this defeat was not enough, there were some controversies related to Islam Makhachev's health which he never told anyone about. Islam was scheduled to face Drew Dober in his third fight in the organization, but the fight was called off as Islam was suspended from the UFC for using a banned substance named meldonium. Sometime before his scheduled fight with Dober, Islam underwent heart surgery where he went through radio frequency ablation. He was prescribed by his doctor to use meldonium as he was suffering from a rare heart disease where the heart takes abnormal beats. The drug is an excellent treatment for numerous cardiovascular and neurological conditions brought on by erratic blood flow. That being said, it was still brought to the surface as a prohibited substance after Islam Makhachev suffered his first and only defeat. It was banned because the drug is also known to increase a user's ability to gain extreme cardio and endurance. However, the UFC recognized the fact that the drug was used for medical purposes, and after a US ADA clearance, the ban was lifted, and Islam was given the okay to compete in the UFC again. After such setbacks, many fighters would give up on their hopes of reaching the top, but Islam's mental fortitude wasn't going to let him stop. He metaphorically and physically believed in his heart that the journey was rough, but indeed the destination was beautiful. As his UFC career resumed, he grabbed 2 back-to-back victories over Chris Wade and Nick Lentz at UFC 208, which boosted his confidence. The good times were back as Makhachev was back on track and Khabib was hunting down the lightweight division. The two childhood friends who faced every sort of hardship at a young age were shining bright parallel to each other under the vibrant lights of the octagon. What will follow next would be a highlight reel as Islam showed his knockout power as he knocked Gleison Tibau out cold at UFC 220. It can also be said that Tibau was a man who gave problems to Khabib when he faced him earlier in his career. This indicated that Islam could not only grapple but can even strike with the best in the division. He would go on to win 3 more fights and extend his win streak to 17, and one beating the likes of Kajan Johnson and Arman Sarukian.
Islam Makhachev!
As Islam continued his rise in the UFC, Khabib already had become the UFC Lightweight King. He submitted Conor McGregor at UFC 229. It was already turning ugly when Conor talked smack about the Dagestani people and disrespected their religion and moral values before the fight.
A little hard man in groups, a man who grows in numbers, but on his own cowers away.
After the fight, Khabib jumped the cage and started a brawl in the crowd. It was in the crowd where Islam punched the McGregor fanboy, Dylan Dennis. This brawl would also be where UFC featherweight Zubaira Tukhugov sucker punched Conor shortly after jumping inside the octagon. Dana White was adamant about kicking Islam and Zubaira out of the UFC. Nevertheless, Khabib came to the defense of his brothers and threatened to leave the UFC if they decided to kick the two of them out of the company. Khabib would face Dustin Poirier at UFC 242, where he would defend his title.
Khabib, the Eagle Nurmagomedov!
And Islam would beat Davy Hamash to extend his run to 18-1. In the post-fight press conference, the Eagle would place the belt in front of Islam while he was giving the interview and call him the next lightweight champion.
Thank you, brother.
As it was called the father's plan, although the biggest tragedy was yet to follow as AbulMunap Nurmagomedov passed away due to heart failure after contracting coronavirus.
Why I have so much everything in my life. I want to say thank you for my father.
The heartbreaking events led to Khabib fighting one last time in the octagon, defeating Justin Gaethje and leaving the sport of MMA as a fighter forever.
That is not with me, it's very hard time.
The passing of AbulMunap was a disaster for Islam Makhachev, as he was mentally shaken after the events of his death. He not only lost a coach which trained him to become an athlete, but he also lost a father and a mentor who genuinely took care of him since he was a child. Now, Islam had to work through the sadness of losing a mentor and focus on the plan which AbulMunap set for him, which was to be the next champion after Khabib retires. Islam would face difficulties in booking the match with top contenders of the division because of his dominant style of grappling. No one was willing to face him apart from Drew Dober, Thiago Moises, and Dan Hooker. Islam ran through these opponents and established a 10-fight win streak.
You can run, but you can hide. I'm coming, I'm here.
His breakthrough fight with Rafael dos Anjos failed a couple of times, and he also could not secure the Tony Ferguson fight.
And now I'm gonna give him 3-4 months. Let's do this.
Due to this, his ranking never improved, and Charles Oliveira became the champion, defeating Michael Chandler. The father's plan was taking too long to execute, and Islam was constantly growing frustrated over the lack of contenders wanting to fight him. Finally, the UFC booked a match between Islam and Beneil Dariush.
Dana had said the fight to make was you and Beneil Dariush. Do you like him as a potential opponent?
But as fate would have it, Dariush got injured in the camp, and the fight with the top contender was once again called off. Bobby Green stepped in on short notice only to get mauled by the Dagestani beast. Islam then called out Dana White for a title shot, as it was evident that no one wants to face him.
What do you want next?
I just won a title fight.
During all this time, Khabib supported Islam as his coach, mentor, and took care of his finances as well. Meanwhile, Charles Oliveira was on a run of his own after beating Poirier and Gaethje, and he also had won the 2022 ESPYs Fighter of the Year award. He was on a run of 11 consecutive victories, whereas Islam was on a run of 10 straight victories. Finally, the UFC booked the fight between the two at UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi, after a lot of speculation as to who was the best lightweight on the planet. On October 22nd, Islam faced Oliveira and mauled the former champ with his crisp striking and out-of-the-world grappling.
Watching Islam and Charles Oliveira, that was what a fight that was.
He took Oliveira down with ease and submitted the person who has the most submissions in UFC history via triangle choke.
His squeeze must be out of this world, because you see how quick Charles tapped.
After the fight, Islam dedicated the win to Khabib and his father and gave them the credit for making him the man he is today.
My belt for my coach, AbulMunap Nurmagomedov. He told me, just training hard and you gonna be champion.
Therefore, the father's plan was complete, and there is no argument as to who is the best lightweight on the planet. After the spine-tingling journey of Islam Makhachev, it is evident that he carries an unfair advantage that other fighters do not.
Islam Makhachev must have the most incredible squeeze. His squeeze must be out of this world.
Getting beaten up by the kid since he was a child, training in the mountains with rocks and sparring beast after beast in Dagestan, dealing with bad financial conditions, overcoming heart problems, following strict discipline all of his life, on top of the foundations of AbulMunap and the coaching of Khabib molded him into the warrior he is today. Indeed, Islam Makhachev is the embodiment of the fighter, and his story is just getting started.